Trystie's Quest, or Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons. By Greville MacDonald. Chapter 23. Kit is at last shock-led and Trystie is very brave. Kit is adopted. The great fire promises a better beginning. That drink of fairy dew did much to encourage them for what followed. Trystie at least needed every bit of strength that her heart could hold. I dare not let myself think what might have happened but for her fortitude. Breakfast over, the captain brought the two children on deck again, and they found the ship at anchor in the moat of the Queen's castle. They got into the gig which was lowered and manned once more, and they were rowed under a little archway through which the water ran merrily into the fairy garden. Trystie's godmother was waiting for them. She held her child's hair back with both her hands and kissed her tenderly on both eyes, on her forehead, and on her mouth. Then she lifted Robin into her arms, kissed him also and set him down again, while he still held the string of his airball. She called 2 sheepdog pups, 2 kittens, and 2 yellow-beaked blackbirds in green jackets, and set them all romping. In a minute the child was laughing and clapping his hands, the puppies were barking and the kittens leaping at the airball, the birds were singing nursery rhymes. But to Trystie the Queen spoke in words very serious and tender. "Trystie," she said, "there is no time to lose. If you are brave, you will not be too late. Greater things are yet to be done by you, if our Kit is to be saved. The captain will not be far from your side. My river can never leave you, and I shall always be where you need me most." She led her across the garden, straight to a very low archway, under which the deep water was running away. Trystie remembers still hearing Robin's glee and the blackbirds singing. "Under there you may go, darling child," the Queen said, "into the bottom of the sea. The iron chest must be found if you would save Kit." "Yes, godmother," answered Trystie, without any doubting. For one moment she flung her arms round the Queen and buried her face in her bosom. The Queen kissed her once more and thrust her lovingly from her. The child jumped into the stream, sank into the water and was carried away into the deeps of the sea. She stood alone in a long street of tumble-down whelk shells for houses, with doors and windows gaping and stairways within. Sea plants were growing up the stairs and out at the windows and waving above in great masses, so that the deserted city was very dark. Great crabs, decked out in rags of gaudy goblin clothes, crawled about sideways, but did not molest her. Something within carried her along, but everything was so much changed since she had fled from the place 2 years before that she could not find her way. Came racing to her out of a huge shell house, Curdie. He stood up as high as possible, very gaunt and shaggy. He put his paws upon Trystie's shoulders and she kissed his head. "Quick, quick, Miss Trystie," he said, "Kit's shockled. Unless you get there in time, he'll—" "Where is the iron chest, Curdie?" she asked. "Godmother says I must get that first." Curdie ran ahead and Trystie followed through intricate ways and streets. The dog kept on muttering, "Waste of time, the keys could wait. I should think the Queen must be right. I suppose, perhaps she doesn't know all the danger. Hurry along. Hurry. Hurry, Miss Trystie." The difficulty was the crabs always in the way, always afraid of being hurt, their very efforts at getting out of the way making them, because they couldn't go straight, more than ever obstructive. But Curdie knew what he was about and did what he was told, though he felt angry at the delay. "If you loved Kit," he said crossly, but only half meaning it, "you would leave the keys till tomorrow and come with me straight. Do you know, miss, they've plugged up the recorder. He's nearly dead." "Oh, Curdie, don't hurt me," piteously said Trystie, "but help me. We must obey the Queen because she knows everything. She loves Kit better, I think, than even you and I do." Then they went into a dark cave. Even the light in Curdie's eyes was enough to see by, but, as I am told, Trystie's whole person shone like an angel's. The place was full of awful old crabs guarding the iron chest. Curdie seized one after the other, cracking their claws and throwing them out of the cave. It was a large chest, half buried in the sand. From underneath crawled huge black eels with 2 rows of suckers on the under part of them. Curdie gave each an awful bite and they all shriveled up, dead. Trystie recognized them as the tentacles of the monster squids which used to defend the city. They had wriggled away when I lopped them off. Then she laid hold of one handle of the chest and tugged at it. It yielded and she dragged it along in spite of its weight, while Curdie pushed behind. The crabs, dull greeny blue and spotted with red, snapped their biting claws in her face and glared at her with their stalky black eyes, but dared not touch her. Once out of the cave, the chest became lighter and they dragged it along more easily. Curdie still grumbled though he worked so hard. "If the Queen loved him better than I do," he said, the hair of his head so unkempt that it almost hid his eyes, "she would know better than to waste time over such a chest as this is. It's almost impossible." "Curdie, dog," answered Trystie, looking back at him happily, because she understood, from the weight getting so quickly less and less, that they were doing the only right thing and would therefore be in time. "Curdie, dog, when the Queen has said a thing must be done, it's not only possible to do it, but it's the only thing to do. And you know that as well as I do. You want a bone or two, doggy." Curdie showed that he understood Trystie's playful encouragement by a little wag of his hind quarters and one short sharp bark. Trystie now found she was actually and easily carrying the iron chest in one hand. The dog went into the doorway of a huge shell building that seemed to be all stair inside. Up and up they ran and the tiny keys chinked almost merrily in the iron chest. They came out at the top into a waste place laid out like a garden, but with the flowers all dead. They ran again, and saw before them two great pearl gates set in tumble-down walls, and behind the gates were sounds of roaring. The air seemed very warm, and by the time they reached the gates, it was hotter than any summer day. They heard a great crackling sound like monster faggots burning, and over the tops of the gates they presently saw huge tongues of red and yellow flame with myriads of comet-like sparks rushing into the dark blue sky above. Curdie set up that sharp incisive bark which he always uses when he wants a door opened to let him in. The only response was a noise of howls and laughter. Curdie leapt at the gates in fury. They fell down into the flames, which rushed out at the gates terrifically. But Curdie jumped back in time. "That can't be the way, Curdie," said Trystie, her face now white enough. "It was the way I came out, and must be the way we go in," said Curdie, almost savagely. "If you'd only taken my advice, Miss Trystie, we might have been in time." "If that's the way, we are in time," was Trystie's only answer. Then before her in the heart of the roaring flames she saw clearly a little rainbow window. Through it she could see, beyond the flames, an open space. It was full of Pigwidgeons, dancing hideously, fighting fearfully, howling and laughing, round the king's throne. On the throne sat Kit, his head between his knees and his hands clasped above, as if closing tightly ears and eyes. His smock was in rags and his shoes were in gaping holes, but he held his recorder tightly under his arm. The horrible little monsters were pushing the throne slowly backwards as if to thrust it away into the flaming furnace behind. Then the flames came together and hid them all, though the rainbow still shone. Curdie stood up in front of Trystie, put his paws on her shoulders and said simply, "Not you, miss, my turn first. No, Curdie, you must let me go at once, or we shall lose Kit and Faith and Godmother and all." Then she put her face into her hands and said under her breath, "Oh, the heat is awful, Godmother, and I am afraid." At that very moment she heard a splashing and scamper of water, and there stood by her side the leprechaun. "Come, Princess," he said. "Quick, quick." He pulled his belt off, and waved it aloft for one moment. Its flash of green and white light was so vivid that the flames seemed to lose their fierceness. Then with a twist of his wrist, the belt lashed round Trystie's waist and the free end flew round Curdie's neck. The buckle part the captain still held. Straight into the flames, straight through the rainbow's 7 sacred colors, the three went together. Not a hair of head or body was singed. They stood in a place of hot sand where the Pigwidgeons were howling around Kit's throne. In a moment the leprechaun's belt of living water which no fire could harm was released. Again the Captain Cobbler swung it 3 times round his head with such wild vigor that the rain fell in torrents upon that swarm of wicked Pigwidgeons. It damped their sins, their hate, and their exultations, so that one by one they rolled over and lay still upon their sides or backs. Yet they tried to hide behind one another as if from something they feared. Curdie cleared a path through them, and Trystie saw soft green grass already beginning to grow. She ran up to the throne and called Kit by name, throwing her arms about him. He looked up, but could hardly believe it when he saw her whom he loved best after his mother. He staggered to his feet and just fell into his sister's arms, quite unconscious. Then came the leprechaun. He took off the boy's shoes, one with its sole torn right off, and sat down before the sister and brother. Out of one pocket came awl, lapstone, and hammer, out of another bristles and thread and wax. With his knife he cut pieces from his own leather jerkin and began to cobble the shoes. Every time he pulled tight his threads, he would look up at Trystie. The silver belt lay at his feet and ran away singing. It made an icy cold brook round the three, bidding irises and meadowsweet to grow, and then ran away, ever widening as it disappeared among the roaring mountains of flame. Trystie had taken Kit's head in her lap. How thin and white he was! She dipped her hand into the cold water, gave him to drink and bathed his face. He opened his eyes for one moment and Trystie saw they were unharmed. He was soon breathing quietly as if fast asleep. Then she reached out to the iron chest at her side, and raised the lid quietly so as not to disturb the boy. She took out a handful of tiny bright keys of all sorts and shapes and sizes and colors. But somehow, she could not explain it, they all looked as if they were seeds waiting to be sown. Perhaps it was the fairy cobbler's song that made her feel this: cobble new soles for the worn-out shoes. Every kind of soul is good, every joy and sorrow is food, good for the slumbering seeds in prize, food for the venturesome heart that tries to cobble new shoes for the worn-out souls. Scatter sweet rain on the thirsty dead. Seeds find light through the narrowest chink, push up green hands for their food and drink, then find their keys to the mystic door, and dance with young lambs on the fairy floor, cobble new souls for the worn-out dead. Every key had a label, each with a name. Curdie sat by, somewhat aloof, and watched the flames. Trystie called out in her young, ringing voice each name. Then, one by one, those abandoned Pigwidgeons rose up at the sound of his or her long-forgotten name, and came to Trystie, shambling and ashamed. Now that their wickedness was checked, Trystie saw they were badly pecked all over. This was, I suppose, the outcome of the battle the birds were to fight when Kit piped their marching song. As the Pigwidgeons now slowly came up to Trystie, they all looked over their shoulders to right and left as if afraid of something. Was it of the creaky cart? Or was each ashamed of owning a name before the others? One by one they held out rooty, dry, timid hands, and Trystie gave everyone his or her own key. Instantly the key disappeared and the creature walked away, piteously crying like a baby for its mother. They all crept away behind the throne and, huddled together, cried themselves to sleep. 2 keys were left in the chest unclaimed. Trystie had not given many away when Kit awoke, and, without moving or saying one word, watched her and the Pigwidgeons. He must have been thinking how these miserable creatures had, after all his success in ruling them, and in spite of his despising them with all his heart, succeeded in terrifying him. He began to weep. "Kit, boy," whispered Trystie, divining his thoughts and shame, "I have something to confess to my brave brother. Kit, dear, I was awfully frightened at the flames. And if Captain Leprechaun had not taken me, and if Godmother had not sent him well, I don't know what would have happened. And, Kit, you wouldn't have been frightened if they had not plugged up your recorder." Then Kit was happier. He checked his tears, got up wearily, took his recorder to the Captain Cobbler, and asked him to pick out the plug with his awl. This was easily done and the plug proved to be a long strip of Parson Parsnip's velvet coat. Then Kit played his recorder again. The music came so soft and sweet that it seemed to find in everyone's heart a deep silence, like, Trystie says, a starlit sea, waiting for the sunrise. Then the flames became less fierce. They lost their reds and yellows, the greens and blues remained. Their roar and crack and hiss died away. It grew dark as night, and very soon the flames looked like a sea of steel-blue, rocking waves, into which the river peacefully flowed. Then right through the sea, and up into the river, came sailing a fleet of fleecy pink clouds bringing in tow the rosy dawn. Kit's music once again had brought the fairy ships. On the prow of the royal barge, with 12 oars on each side, 1 mast, and a great burning red lateen sail, with its emblem of the fairy cross shining like silver upon it, stood the Queen. She stepped ashore and ran to the children. "Godmother," exclaimed Trystie, jumping up, "you mustn't kiss me till I tell you. I was afraid to do your bidding when I saw the flames, even though the rainbow shone through them." "Oh, Godmother, I am ashamed." Trystie began to sob and cry. The Queen stood before the 2 children and spread a wing round each of them. "Dear children," she said, "there's no shame in being afraid of terrifying things. If you could not be afraid, you would never grow braver and braver as you must and will do. Will you be my godson, Kit?" Kit looked up with a happy face. Trystie hid her face in the Queen's soft wing and her tears were dried. Then the Queen called the cobbler. "Captain, dear friend," she asked, "are both pairs ready?" "Yes, mighty Queen," he answered. "'Tis the princess's homing shoes are ready this 13 year. Prince Kit's were ready too before I took his measure." He put away carefully all his tools and then came and knelt on one knee before Trystie. She lifted each foot in turn. He took off the red shoes and put on a new pair of blue ones, pulling from his belt a glittering silvery blue lace, running it through the eyeholes quickly, and tying a beautiful bow. The lace looked like runnels of water going in and out, crossing and recrossing to meet at last and fall in 2 little cascades of fringe. "Queen," said he, "one of the red shoes I'll be keeping for me pains and for me happiness. The other will it be your will, I'm thinking, that she always keeps it for a hold upon Fairyland and a fairer man who loves her." "Yes, brave captain," answered the Queen, "yes indeed." Then Kit's turn came. His blue shoes fitted perfectly, and the shining strings looked grand. "Now, Kit," the cobbler said, "you must shake hands with me, because ye re more a man than a king and I'm kind of brother to ye. When ye grown as big a man as you ought, you'll be every inch a king. It's myself will not grow any bigger, though I'm every inch a little cobbler, every inch the captain of the Queen's fleet, and every inch as long as me belt." The Queen then asked the captain to have the ugly throne removed. He whistled. Sailors came running from the ships. They seized the heavy thing and it broke into dry mouldy twigs and the skin of a stoat. The sailors then all fluttered away, like thistledown, upon important affairs. Behind where the throne had stood, lay shriveled roots of every kind scattered all about. But few had any resemblance to living creatures. Some looked as though they had been pecked all over by birds, others as though they might once have had faces, though they had lost their eyes. "These," said the Queen, "are of no use now. They are choking the choose keys. Kit, there is one last thing you must do for your subjects, if you would leave them in kindness. Throw every one into the flames." "Are they quite dead then, godmother?" asked the boy. He was now full of sorrow for the wretched things. "These roots are all quite dead like prisons," answered the Queen. "We must open the doors by burning them down, and so set the children free. The flames are mine too, and my river controls them. Throw them in, Kit, one by one. Captain Leprechaun, and his sailors too, will help you." Then came the silvery sailors once more, and the burning began. The flames leaped again into their fierceness, with orange and rosy reds, bright yellows and fleeting greens. But they no longer roared and hissed, and the sparks did not fly. Among the roots Kit saw and picked up the parson's white tie, which Miss Duckling must have lost. "Trystie," he asked, "have you a choose key left for King Parsnip?" "Yes," she said, "this one must be his because it is so rusty. The other, I am sure, is Miss Duckling's, because it's pearly and bright." Then Kit took the little key and rubbed it till it shone as bright as any of the others. He carefully tied it up in the piece of dirty white tape that had so feebly stood for a certain dignity of office. "Godmother," the boy asked, "was his soul always wrapped up in his choker?" "I think it almost always was, Kit," answered the Fairy Queen, with a loving laugh, enjoying, "I cannot but think, my boy's not irreverential fun, but he must have his chance, like the others, of getting outside his prison. Throw it into the flames, Kit." Kit obeyed. Then he saw, shining on the ground, the brass ornament that had served for Cricket's breastplate. He had no sooner put it in his pocket to take back to Charlie, the carter, than Curdie came up carrying something in his front teeth so gingerly that it was clearly distasteful to him. He dropped it at Kit's feet and looked up with a question twitching his nostrils. It was the rusty spring of the rat trap, and stuck on its point was the peppermint bullseye. Kit was for putting these also in his pocket, when the Queen stopped him. "I think, Kit," she said, "these also must go into the flames. No one can tell where Cricket's soul and the choose key may be." So Kit threw them in also, and was right glad to see the last of the bullseye. As each hard, shriveled, shapeless thing was cast into the fire, a fiercer and more glorious flame rushed up into the air. Even the remains of Parson Parsnip made a great beautiful tongue of fire, and the peppermint burned gloriously. Curdie stood up on his hind legs to see better, and then fairly danced for joy. The children watched in silent wonder. "It is so terrible and beautiful, godmother," said Trystie. She and Kit are both sure of this, that, just as the tongue of each flame broke and vanished into the dark sky, a dimly seen, sleeping but happy, babyface, with two silvery wings behind it, disappeared also. End of this chapter.